Hello everyone, I'm Lucy Hawkins. Very good to have you with us. I hope you're all well caffeinated, particularly if you arrived on a flight in the middle of the night. It's a bit of a struggle for some people, particularly on the panel, but we have had a lot of coffee and a great conversation already today. So I know we're going to deliver a really interesting and fascinating panel for you, because we are delving into the urgent need to boost infrastructure investments and how we can make that happen with public-private partnerships. I think all of you in the room probably know that these investments not only bolster integration and economic competitiveness, but they really do catalyse growth and job creation as well. However, the conventional sovereign financing model is really falling short. And PPPs have become this pivotal mechanism in infrastructure development. They really effectively leverage private sector involvement to involve additional financing, expertise, and also technological advances. And what we're trying to do in this panel today for you is really dive into how we can attract more private investment into urban and transport projects in this region. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how PPPs can make these projects financially viable, and especially in emerging markets. We're going to focus on some of the business opportunities that there are out there, but also really what is needed to make sure that these projects can deliver bankable results. Not just about the money, though, as well. You'll all know how important it is to talk about how these projects meet high standards and how we can also tackle some very challenging and pressing climate challenges. It's really good to see you all here, and I want this to be an interactive and conversational panel, so please do send me your questions. You'll all know how to use Slido, I'm sure. Here are the instructions for you here on the screen. So let me know the sort of things you'd like me to put to the panel. You might want to know more about what sort of opportunities there are in the region, how different agencies can all pull together and work together, whether you're an investor, you represent a government, multilaterals as well. What's the best way that everyone can collaborate and what you need? Those are the kind of questions that we might get from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to start taking those questions quite early on in the panel. So don't wait until the end. Send me your questions on Slido, or if you're a little bit old-fashioned, just put up your hand and someone will come to you with a microphone and we can get to you pretty quickly. So let me introduce to you our fantastic panel today. Thierry Dieu is the founder and CEO of Meridium, an independent investment firm that specialises in development, financing and management of long-term and sustainable infrastructure practices. Odubek Isakov is CEO and co-founder of InfraAsia, an infrastructure advisory firm. He's just come from London, but also based in Tashkent. Astrid Meinrath is head of the Global Infrastructure Facility, and don't worry, I'm going to ask her to explain to us exactly what it is that she does very soon. But she has 25 years of experience in development finance and sustainable investments. And next to me is Ekaterina Miroshnik, who is often called Katya, Director and Head of Infra Eurasia at the EBRD. Good to have you all with us. Don't forget the Slido. Katya, I'm going to start with you. Take us through what the scene is out there. Set the scene for us in terms of infrastructure needs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Lucy. Great to be on this panel. So in terms of infrastructure and infrastructure needs, there are estimates that the infrastructure gap is huge and it's widening. And from this year to 2030, or 2040 actually, it's going to be $8.3 trillion US. So it is huge, and it's also huge for emerging markets. And of course, without infrastructure investments, many economies in the region won't be able to develop their economic potential. Our region, the EBRD region, suffers from poor infrastructure, so it's still the case, unfortunately. To meet this challenge, what is required? Firstly, increased electrification of various infrastructure operations. The integration of renewables into municipal social infrastructure and transport. The scale-up of alternative low carbon emission fuels, for example, in the maritime and aviation sectors. And of course, it all shall be backed by various support measures. So you can see on the slide, the investment gap, in various regions. Basically, we estimate it's between 1.7 to 4.3% of GDP, for each country, depending on the region. But what you can also see that in some regions it's larger, in some regions it's smaller. For example, in Eastern Europe and Caucasus, it's around $7.4 billion US, the annual infrastructure gap. In Central Asia, it's $9.1 billion US, and in some countries like Turkey, it's almost 20 billion. So again, the infrastructure gap is huge, and it's difficult to close. What we estimate for the whole EBRD economies the annual investments required is around 50 billion US dollars per annum. So what EBRD is trying to do is we usually invest around 2 billion per each 4 or 5 years. So this is, of course, marginal, of course, and we have to do more. And we see there is potential to do more through public-private partnerships. And we expect to see more PPPs going forward. And, of course, private capital can bring value, can bring, lots of technology, lots of know-how to our region. So where we are at the moment, the region lags behind in terms of PPPs. If you compare the EBRD region with Latin America or with Asia, it's so far behind in terms of number of PPPs and investment volumes. In terms of numbers, for example, last year in the EBRD region, there were only 11 PPPs closed versus 64 PPPs in Asia. So in Asia, it was 6 times more. So again, a lot to do in the PPP space. We hope that private capital can bring value, and we are happy to support private investors in the region.
Terry, what's your experience with PPPs?
Hello, and happy to be with you today. The straight answer is great, but I'll be a bit more explicit. I can think of a few real benefits for sort of using this contractual structure to build the world and infrastructure. And the first is it's probably the only way, because of its long-term partnership, to guarantee the social and economic impact for the long term in terms of what these type of things can deliver. Clearly, if you think about a school or a hospital or even a road, engaging private sector with the government on a whole life costing basis, where you're really thinking about a 20-year, 30-year partnership and how to guarantee the level of service to the population. So that's sort of the social benefit, but also that does provide the jobs, the economic benefits, with a guarantee of a long term. When you think about things being built by government alone, typically after 5 to 10 years, fiscal constraints prevent them from doing sort of anything in terms of repairing it. So I really like the idea of the best guarantee for long-term benefits. It has other benefits, but we can talk about that a bit later.
Odebek, I know you were thrilled when I mentioned to you earlier that Terry said how exciting it is in Uzbekistan at the moment when it comes to this environment. Can I ask you to set the scene there, because there are so many projects in the pipeline at the moment?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and it's great to be here. Thanks, EBRD, for inviting me to this panel as well. Yes, despite the fact that PPP is relatively new in Uzbekistan, the PPP law came into effect in 2019, only 5 years ago. The amount of PPPs signed exceeds $17 billion. So within 5 years, it's just to contextualize. It's about in this year's GDP, it's about 17% of GDP that Uzbekistan has managed to attract over the last 5 years. And in Strategy 2030, the government wants to attract $30 billion of private sector funding under PPP modality to further build the infrastructure. And the success obviously comes with a lot of hard work and support from the IFIs like EBRD, Asian Development Bank, IFC, and other development partners, as well as the political will from the senior leadership as well.
Those are big numbers. How many actual projects have you got earmarked? Right. Close to 100, right?
Well, the completed projects, again, big and small, right? Over 400. There are 350 projects over less than $1 million, and then around 50 projects over $1 million. And some of the projects can be, let's say, Veolia project, Tashkent district heating project is 1.4 billion euros. So range is quite big. So and in the pipeline we have over 100 projects to my knowledge.
Wow. Astrid, it's a really basic question that I'm starting with to you, but I think it's important that you explain to us what the Global Infrastructure Facility actually does.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, and thanks for having me on this great panel. Pleasure to be here. So, as we heard, the infrastructure investment needs are such that we really need both public and private efforts in order to close the gap. And to do that, we also need to have a bit of a revolution how we scale up private investment into infrastructure, which is really at the heart of meeting the twin challenge of meeting the SDGs and the Paris climate goals as well. And one of the factors that's currently putting a little bit of the brakes on scaling up private capital is the availability of shovel-ready investment opportunities. And that's exactly where the Global Infrastructure Facility comes in. We are a project preparation facility that was set up by the G20 10 years ago to advise governments in emerging markets in the preparation of these complex long-term projects, as Thierry said, for private investment. And we work in partnership with and through 11 multilateral development banks, including EBRD as a very trusted partner in this region, and really focusing on connecting the work that has been done on upstream environment in terms of regulation, investment climate, to downstream finance by providing the midstream transaction advisory services and championing governments through the processes of identifying project concepts, validating commercial viability, and then guiding and advising them through the stages of pre-feasibility, feasibility, preparation of tender processes, and contract structures as well.
Terry.
I just wanted to sort of rebound on this sort of upstream issue, which is sort of the bottleneck for the emergence of PPPs. And I mean, we have at Meridian probably 100 assets that are PPPs in our portfolio over the past 20 years. And I think the real common point is, and we've done a lot of first PPP in countries, and the most common point is the lack of capacity in those countries and the ability to really sort of create the project and make them available for a partnership with the private sector. So it's very key, and in particular in this region, when you have the Global Infrastructure Facility, but the EBRD Preparation Facility are very key tools to really help government sort of prepare this partnership and engage.
And Astrid, how is it working with the different agencies, and how collaborative is that effort?
So we are a global public-private collaboration platform, and as I mentioned, we work through and with the MDBs. So in this region, EBRD is really one of our partners of choice. So we work with Matthew's team on the advisory side, and also, helping Uzbekistan, bringing some of these wonderful PPP programs to market. But also we have a private sector advisory council, so where Thierry is actually a member, where we have the opportunity to also bring projects live to the private sector for input on structuring and making sure that what we support is really bankable and also will be sustainable in the long term.
Odebek, can you explain more specifically to us that you were involved in setting up the Uzbekistan PPP project development facility? How was that process, and then why did you end up signing with the EBRD?
This really was timely because there are a couple of, I would say, just if I may complement Terry's earlier remarks on the fiscal constraints, if you don't mind, because it's connected. When PPPs are relatively young in the country, people start considering PPPs versus EPC contracts funded by the budget or otherwise. And hence, the money for value assessment and making sure that people understand the full picture, the 20-year, 30-year horizon, the life of the asset, quality of service provision. It's a little hard to convince and explain it to people. So that was one of the, let's say, challenges that we continue facing actually in Uzbekistan when it comes to PPPs. And second challenge, big challenge, is actually the belief that PPPs take longer time to prepare. And of course, this is needed in most cases. I think, for environmental and social assessment needs to take long, technical assessment, the feasibility study, all these important steps need to be taken before project can become bankable and banks can fund, and also it's fiscally affordable, because fiscal constraints are real in emerging markets, in Uzbekistan, and hence PPPs are now considered as contingent liabilities within the public debt law. This is very important because with this provision now, government is considering to make sure that whenever government signs PPPs, they have to look through the fiscal angle and to make sure that it's affordable for the governments to do. And potentially this will lead to certain limits, annual limits for PPPs, which will be a healthy move to prioritize. UPDF is important, so Uzbek Project Development Fund, so UPDF is important to shorten the time frame of selecting consultants. When the idea was presented by Matthew and EBRD team, we loved it. So it's taken us quite a bit of time to discuss, and finally it's signed in February with the government. And I think what I liked about this is that, now with this facility, government can select necessary consulting firms, which are really important for the upstream work, to the panels, and then select the consultants within a short space of time. So whatever used to be 6 months, sometimes 8 months process, is now shortened to few weeks, basically, which is a great achievement, and this will help the government and help the private sector to convince that project preparation time can be shortened by several months.
It's really interesting to hear some of the challenges that Urubek talks about there. And Terry, I wonder, you started off by saying that you think PPPs are great. What is the most convincing thing you can say to people to change some of the mindset that Urubek's talking about when they feel hesitant?
I mean, from a private sector perspective, I mean, what he just explained is exactly what we're looking for. It's this efficiency in the process, the perspective of the pipeline, so you have potential investable assets in front of you, so you can actually mobilize money, people, capital, you name it, to actually address these issues, and in a speedy way.
Well, 2 weeks is now sounding pretty speedy.
No, it's very important, because I think a lot of PPP or attempt fail because of a lack of preparation and the lead time that it really takes to really deliver. You don't really want to be waiting for 3 years to get one of those out, because you're not going to be around. Because and it is true
we
that
hope you will be.
No, in emerging markets in particular, and I think that's something we share a lot, and we partner with EBRD in many of these countries. In the countries of operation of EBRD, we have probably a dozen or 15 assets together. If you take a long time to deliver this, then private investors will have a bit of an arbitrage. There are many geographies around the world where you can go and invest in PPPs. So if governments really want to mobilize this capital to develop their economy and bring social services to their economy, then they need to be efficient. And that's really a key point there.
Kasia, I think it's time to talk about some achievements, because what is the EBRD doing? What are the strategies that you've got for supporting some of these big infrastructure investments?
We basically focus on municipal and transport infrastructure. And the cross-cutting themes, in this area so far has been electrification, decarbonization, asset renewal, using green infrastructure, digital solutions, and human capital development. Over the last 5 years, we committed more than 10 billion euros of investments in infrastructure, and we financed more than 300 projects across our region. So as you probably know, we have this Green Cities flagship program. Under this program, over the last 5 years, we've done more than 70 projects. Again, focusing on reduction of carbon emissions, digitalization, promoting some gender and inclusion. So we are very proud to say that more than 23 million people benefited from improved water, wastewater, district and solid waste services financed by the EBRD. Around 3.5 million people benefited from improved urban transport services financed by the EBRD. Of course, we're also doing a lot in rail and roads. We construct new roads, we reconstruct them, also build new railways, across our region. We do fleet renewal, and of course, work a lot on increasing ports and airport capacity. And from time to time, we support aviation projects. I'm really pleased to to mention that earlier this year we supported Air Astana IPO. Air Astana is one of the regional airlines, and they were listed at the London Stock Exchange, and we were very proud to participate in that IPO with this client. Going forward, we are thinking about 3 strategic directions, for us for the next 5 years. Number 1 is improving connectivity. We expect more projects related to connectivity, across our region. We also expect to see more projects which will strengthen infrastructure resilience. And also the third area is enhancing climate and nature solutions. And what we mean by this is we expect to see more projects, in the area of nature-based solutions, in particular in cities, and also, we'll have to deepen our participation under the Green Cities program and climate action in cities. In terms of PPPs, to date, we've financed around 40 PPPs across our region. It's not much. We can do definitely more. But usually what we do, we provide our own financing. We also mobilize capital, from other private players. And we help countries and governments to prepare and structure PPPs through our PPP advisory.
And you have an example, a successful example for us.
Yes, I do have a successful example. It's the Almaty Ring Road, also called Bakad in Kazakhstan. The project cost is around $750 million. It's a 20-year concession to construct and operate the ring road in Almaty in Kazakhstan. So it's a 66-kilometer half-ring road. So it was the first internationally tendered PPP in Central Asia. And in terms of impact, this project is really hard to match in the region. First of all, it will decrease pollution in Almaty. Second, it will improve connectivity and throughput, transit throughput for Kazakhstan along the middle corridor. It will also promote skills transfer, jobs creation, and also introduce new standards in road construction. And last but not least, this road was completed 15 months ahead of schedule and on budget. So notwithstanding the COVID pandemic, notwithstanding supply chain issues and disruptions, and notwithstanding high inflation environment. So this project demonstrates the efficiency and value added by private sector involvement in public infrastructure delivery. So a great example indeed.
Let's have a look. Who were the investors, Katya?
So we had a great consortium of Turkish and Korean companies. So Alarka, Makyol, SK Engineering, and KEC, they've done a great and amazing job. Indeed, the road is operational. It's loved by the public. So again, a great example of a PPP in the region. Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy that I'm getting some questions in on Slido. So let's start incorporating some of those, and then I'll come to you in a moment. I'm just going to ask this question because a lot of you, I think, are already interested in what exactly makes a successful PPP project, particularly in emerging markets. And Mehmet, you're also saying, could we each give an example of what you see as the best model where the government and other key players have worked together really, really well to deliver, and also it's been a smooth process. We've just seen one, but Terry, what's your best example?
If I give best example, everybody gets jealous. So I give a few. You
don't have like choosing your favorite child.
No, but I mean, there are quite a number of very good examples. If I start from closer to Europe, in the EBRD regions, I think one of the recent ones where the Global Infrastructure Facility was also involved is the privatization of Sofia Airport and the refurbishment of the entire airport and decarbonization of the airport under a long-term PPP scheme. that was an exciting thing in an environment that was not quite prone to PPP, actually, and very successful today, because the whole thing has changed in 3 years. But in terms of sort of social infrastructure in the neighboring country, that in Turkey, for example, we've managed to deliver nearly 5,000 public hospital beds in less than 8 years through PPP schemes. And for me, when the success, despite the service that is provided and that is guaranteed, was at the time of the earthquakes, where actually those hospitals became a bit of a shelter for quite a number of things, were able to be reorganized to welcome orphans, all kinds of things. And we could see the agility, the ability to actually provide services even in emergency situations from this type of things. So I think that collaboration and partnership is just super efficient.
Do you have a favorite project or debate that you would point to where things ran smoothly?
Although it's not big in terms of size, but my favorite is dialysis project. This project was also relatively smooth in four different cities where private sector has invested in dialysis centers, and they're now running it for the government. I mean, government obviously guarantees a certain number of patients, and they also can provide private services. It is a life-saving procedure, as probably many people know, and with these 4 centers currently operating within a short span of time, they've actually raised service quality to a level that we haven't seen before. So that's definitely my favorite. Of course, there are a number of power projects, renewables, and utility projects, etc. But those are quite important as well. But if I pick one, that's going to be the dialysis project.
Can I ask you more specifically then, Astrid? Obviously, these projects need to be financially viable. They have to follow international standards. There has to be a transparent process around the tendering of these projects as well. But what else are you looking for when you're looking into a project and what you think might make it successful?
Sure, a couple of aspects. I mean, first of all, it's all about risk allocation, right? These are complex projects, and in a way, you have risks that are more public sector-oriented, country risk, political, regulatory, and then you have the project-level risk, technical, commercial demand risk, etc., and some shared risks as well. So it's really about best practice risk allocation, which is, again, where we can come in and support with the help of our technical partners. And then the other important factor, I think, is getting to scale. We have the urgency of closing the investment gap, as we heard, and of course large lighthouse infrastructure projects are one way of doing this, but then also moving from projects to programs and really rolling out programmatic approaches, especially at municipal levels, for example, in the area of energy efficient street lighting or electric mobility. We have done some great stuff together with Thierry on electric bus rapid transit, for example, or also in social infrastructure, really, getting to standardization, replicability, standardizing contracts so that governments can recycle them even after maybe, they have learned through the first couple of rounds of PPPs is really important in this day and age as well.
Astrid raised risk. How do you assess risk? What's your appetite for risk, Thierry?
I think the first level of risk is really the administrative capacity of the country itself. Because when you have a long-term partner, you want to be able to deal on a plain level field basis with a clear contractual framework and clear sort of a judiciary system to deal with issues. So, it's a long-term partnership, it's a marriage. So you need everybody to be sort of capable of getting into the marriage. And I think that's, to be honest with you, that's the biggest long-term risk. And that's really what we focus on first. Then in a way, the technical risk of projects and the revenue risk of projects and all these things are quite solvable because you can actually find mitigants, way of sharing it and way of dealing with those risks that with all the good practices that exist can be solved fairly quickly. But that relationship with government and the ability of government to remain a stable partner is, I would say, for long-term investors like ours, the key risk.
I'd like to come to the lady in blue. Do you still have a question for us? Yes. Just wait 1 second. We'll get you a microphone.
Hi, my name is Natalie Jaresko. I'm with EY Parthenon. I wanted to ask about the Kazakhstan Ring Road. I understood that it was a concession, but what I didn't grasp, it didn't look like a toll road. What are the user fee payments? How is the payment structured for the private consortium? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So it's indeed a toll road, but the concessionaire is basically getting an availability payment from the government. So they collect tolls and pass them to the government. So, but they are being paid through an availability payment scheme.
Any other questions from the floor before we continue? Yes, another lovely lady in blue.
Yeah, hello. I'm also from EY, so we call it. I have a first question for Katya. So we know the role of commercial banks in the region. It's not very active, including local banks. What the reason for this, and what to do to improve it, to participation of the commercial banks, additional to IFIs? And the second question for you. We know, like, restraint on the budget of the, state budget and to cover FX risk. So, you as a private investor, you are ready to take some of the FX risk, at least limited, maybe?
Katya, yes.
So, of course, the more PPPs we have, the more commercial banks' interest we'll have in the region. We are, of course, trying our best to promote the countries and promote projects, and we see relatively high interest, for example, to such countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and, for example, Turkey, in this part of the world. So from commercial banks, not only from international financial institutions, from DFIs and from commercial banks. And of course, the more projects we have, the more interest will be there. The more, I would say, bankable projects we have. And of course, we from EBRD are trying to make sure they are bankable to address investors' needs and also commercial bank needs. Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the FX risks, I think what we always try to do is to match revenue with cost in terms of the same currency. So you do have in local currency OPEX and operation cost and all these things that it's quite okay to actually match the revenues in local currency with that. For the rest, because most of the financing is actually coming in hard currency, then it becomes the same thing that I was talking about, the government relationship. You want a long-term relationship with the government. The government manages its economy, and that does have an impact, a direct impact on its currency. So it's the government to deal with its currency, really. And that's not something we can do on its behalf. And if there's no financial market to do hedging or swaps or whatever, it's very difficult for the private sector to be able to take more than sort of what can be hedged naturally by cost and revenues on the FX.
And Odebek, you wanted to come in on that, yes.
Well, it's a very important question for Uzbekistan's case as well, because most of the PPP agreements are in hard currency, apart from the small ones with local investors. So it's not a solution, because solution is a long-term one. Savings in the country should increase, the GDP should increase, the financial system needs to be sophisticated to be able to provide local currency funding to long-term infrastructure projects, which is not there yet. Probably in large emerging markets like Turkey, perhaps they have more advanced financial system, more depth in the markets. But in countries like Uzbekistan, a government is building, and there's one solution which, again, perhaps partially would address is something that the government has been working with ADB's private sector team. Is infrastructure financing development company. During my time as a deputy minister, we started this discussion, negotiation, together with UPDF actually. And this is basically a company which is set up in Uzbekistan, which will be set up in Uzbekistan with majority either IFI or foreign ownership. And the purpose of this company is to start lending in local currency to PPP projects, not on a sole basis, but perhaps on a syndicated basis. So syndicated project finance facilities also almost non-existent in Uzbekistan, unfortunately. So this will also create the market. And to go a little bit further, I'm at the moment chairman of one of the largest banks in the supervisory board. And I'm also telling them to lend to PPPs because especially where the availability payment is coming from the government, this is a bit, more or less a safe risk. And it's a process. It will take time. And until then, as Thierry mentioned, the government needs to maintain its macroeconomic stability to ensure that the effects, they'll manage the FX risks professionally. And last but not least, the role of the IFIs are very important. Likes of IMF in that kind of environment, because IMF has been a steady partner for Uzbekistan since 2016 in terms of managing these large macro-fiscal risks.
And perhaps to complement, since the global financial crisis, it has been difficult for any banks around the world to actually long-term finance. And it's even more difficult when the financial market is not very developed. So that's why in developed countries, it's mostly the real money comes from long-term investors to finance debt. And if you don't create, as Odilbek just said, this capacity within the country is very difficult. So where IFIs can help is with these refinancing guarantees that they can provide. And those are quite available and can be done, where local banks could actually loan for 7, 10 years, whatever they can, with a guarantee from the IFIs to refinance, to actually reach the maturity that you need for PPP, because you need 20 years, you need long term.
May I ask, so Terry, you mean this, liquidity and construction risk elimination kind of guarantees that we provided in LSE, right? So this type of...
Not exactly this one. This one is more of an enhancement facility, which is a sophisticated blended finance one. But part of the mandate, and that's also one way of doing it, which is enhancing. In Turkey, we've managed to get a high grading, which is still higher than the Turkey's sovereign rating, to get banks and investors to invest on the debt side. But I was mentioning the part of the mandate of IFIs is also to promote local financing, and then what they do is provide a refinancing guarantee to those banks, so they can lend 7 years. The project has the guarantee that this will be refinanced, and those banks can get out somehow, somewhere. And on their balance sheet, that guarantee makes it easier for them to hold this piece of debt.
Almost on this theme, but we've had a question on Slido, and Odilbek, I think you're best placed to answer it, about how you safeguard the impact of a PPP, given some of them only last, perhaps, these contracts for 25 years. What about beyond that?
It's a very good question. I don't know. We've only been doing it for 5 years. But, we've learned the experience of other countries. Of course, again, during my time, we've learned the experience of the UK, Spain, Portugal, Croatia, and others, where in some cases PPPs haven't really worked in the long term, not because it wasn't structured well, it's because the political environment at that time necessitated to be taken over by the perhaps public sector. In Croatia, for instance, toll roads were taken over by the public sector. That was, I think, about 10 years ago. So I think in the long-term management of PPPs, Thierry is absolutely right. The government needs to be committed, and they need to work with investors in order to be able to meet the part of, PPP is both sides. Right? It takes two to tango. So if government doesn't play, then project is not going to happen in the long run. So I think, and Katya's earlier infrastructure gap is real. You go to emerging markets, you go to countries like Uzbekistan, and you go beyond Tashkent, and you see that real need for billions of dollars of investments. And infrastructure, again, is a public good that governments need to be sort of providing the people. It's government's responsibility to make sure that the public good is there. whether it's social or hard infrastructure. And as such, from Uzbekistan's case, as mentioned, there's a very strong support from the senior leadership to make it work, because if you don't play right with one investor, then the second investor will not come, and the third investor will not come, and as such, it needs to be plain, fair playing field, and always I think in the last 2-3 years, there's been some renegotiations of the contracts in favor of investors, like power sector, for instance, and I think it was positive, because after COVID, things have gone up, the prices have gone up, and some of the earlier signed contracts were renegotiated a little bit to make sure that the contract remains the project remains viable. So some concessions need to be made from the government side as well from time to time, just to make sure that projects continue working.
I've got a few questions from the floor. One here first, and then to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the aforementioned Matthew from EBRD. I need to ask this question because of the composition of this panel. Clearly, a lot has already been done, and you've described that. There's the upstream work that Astrid does, which is vital. The midstream project preparation, which, again, Global Infrastructure Facility. There's the government that creates these facilities and puts more emphasis on preparing projects and committing to long-term investments by the private sector. Terry, you do the downstream financing, and you're very active. And, of course, Katya, your team is a partner in that long-term financing. What more could be done? I mean, what is the missing thing here, given everything that we've done for many years? Why is there not more sort of outcome that actually sees more investment happening by the private sector, both the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream follow-through? What's missing here?
It's such a great question, so I'm going to get each of you to answer, starting with you, Astrid.
Yeah, no, it is a great question, and I'm not sure I have the magic wand, but a couple of thoughts. I mean, again, I think it is about getting to scale, so doing this, replicating this faster. So again, I think programmatic solutions are part of the winning strategy, and what EBRD is thinking in terms of national level project preparation facilities, for example, is one way of going about it, or contract standardization and replication is a different way of doing this. I think we also need to really help governments championing these projects through the process faster, so even more capacity building, and that can be provided, and also identifying more investable concepts upstream, right? So, I mean, we have tried to do this at some point. If you look at all the wonderful plans that governments have, there are actually a lot of sometimes even hidden PPP concepts in there that haven't been unearthed yet. So kind of providing even more upstream support to broadening the universe of investable concepts that then we can help prepare is also part of the solution in my mind. And the third element, and this builds a little bit on the EY questions, is also let's be innovative in how we look at risk, because not every institutional investor is, willing, for example, to take development and construction risk like Thierry is doing. And the risk profile of PPPs in development, construction, and operating phase is very different. So we can also mix and match a little bit the financing base in these phases, which can be part of the solution as well.
Thierry.
I mean, I think when government have everything available, it's all about their willingness to really engage in policies. And I'm hoping that all the transitions that we have to go through nowadays, development, social transition, climate, this should be accelerating their sort of political engagement in terms of really launching and wanting to invest. Because, I mean, as we said, infrastructure is a public good. You cannot create a public good without government. And the first is the constituency pushing government to do it. And that chain is not something that you can influence. You can provide all the tools, but that needs to also come from government. So it's also taking responsibilities, especially when all these governments go to all the COPs and line up their INDCs, to then deliver. It's action. They should deliver what they say they will deliver. And I think that focus needs to really be put. So when people go vote, they should tell the government, I actually want you to deliver what you said you would.
Katia, what's the one thing, if you could identify, that would see agencies and groups work together better to see more collaboration and therefore speed things up, perhaps?
Well, it's again the will of the governments to basically go ahead with these complex projects, and PPPs are complex, in particular for this region. We see more dynamics in Turkey, for example, but in the Caucasus and Central Asia, legislation changes should be made, budgetary, changes should be made to make it happen, and also strengthening capacity building, because if you do one project, you want these people who prepared it from the government side to stay and continue and scale up.
And Odubek, perhaps as you answer this question, it was really interesting what you were telling me earlier about the schools project in Uzbekistan, the battle that you've got there. If you explain that project and then say what you can see happening in terms of agencies coming together to make that a reality, what's happening with the schools?
Before schools, can I also answer one other
sure.
solution? And I'm sure, Katia, you expect that coming. It's more opens to unsolicited bids or private initiatives. Or, I know many of you don't like it, but no. But if it's properly structured, if it's proper money for money, value for money assessment has been made. In Uzbekistan's case, we have private initiative embedded in the law, and would like the EBRD, ADB, and other development partners to be more open to this, because as long as there is a process where a private partner is in charge of preparing documentation, so upstream work is done by private sector will bring the efficiency to that process, and it will speed up the preparation, and as long as it's put up for public bid, like if everyone can see it, that the price, the project itself, and nobody can bid, then you need to be allowed to do direct negotiation.
So before you talk about schools, can you respond to that, Katia?
Yes, quickly. On unsolicited proposals or USPs, so of course we realize that the governments don't have capacity to prepare, even together with other IFIs like EBRD, ADB, IFC. Again, it's not enough for capacity money to prepare all these projects, and therefore we see across the region that the governments ask investors to prepare projects for them. And we understand there is room for this, given again the infrastructure gap we were talking about earlier. But for us, what's important, if this USP is prepared, it has to be put through a transparent, competitive, fair process. If that's the case, if it's open to other potential investors to participate, bid, so then, of course, we would be able to consider financing.
Terry, you've got a very diplomatic face on right now, so we're waiting to hear what you have to say.
No, I mean, there are also other solutions. I mean, and they may not be from emerging markets, but I'll take the example of the Welsh education program, which we're an investor in. The government selected a private partner to actually build the capacity. So we actually created a development company with the government, 70% private, 30% government. And this development company is actually launching batches of schools for construction, design and build, and then financing those as small PPPs under a meta PPP agreement. So, and the UK has done quite a lot of this in the health sector in the past with the PCTs and the NHS. It's really a program, but then you build the capacity to actually deliver with the private sector at government time, and then the transparency is below in the construction. So there are ways to do this and scale, because with that, in Wales, we'll do 100 schools. We've done 50 healthcare centres in the UK under the SAFE scheme, so it also works that way.
Yes, you had a question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrei. I'm from engineering firm ECM Group. Matthew has just asked a great question. It's close to mine, and that's why I needed to think harder. To create another one in our question, and that's why, for instance, Uzbekistan government, some of persons from Uzbekistan government said that the process of that the PPP is a great scheme, is a great opportunity to finance and structuring and fill the gap, to fill the infrastructure gap. But there is a question, because there is a long distance and long term to create this project, to get to the financing, and this is a problem from the point of view of government. And we all know that Uzbekistan has a range of PPP projects, but in Kazakhstan, after the Bagat, there were no great PPPs and PPPs at all. Maybe this is the same problem or not. Maybe the Kazakhstan government thinks another way to the PPPs and like the way to finance the infrastructure. Thank you.
Yes, maybe I can answer this one. Of course, this Almaty Ring Road, the Bakat project, right? It took some years to prepare. It was the first one for Kazakhstan, and it took many years to prepare. Also, it entailed some land acquisition of 700 land plots, which was also, a hassle for the government. And they waited for the results of Bakat. And Bakat was constructed and was open to the public last year. And it is a great success for Kazakhstan. And the Kazakh government can now see the success. Basically, the road is working, the road is operation, is in great condition. Again, built 15 months ahead of schedule and on budget. And we expect now that the government to go forward with more PPPs. They're at the moment thinking about social infrastructure. Basically, that's actually the trend across the region, more demand for social infrastructure. But we also expect that there will be more projects in other infrastructure subsectors. What's happening right now in Kazakhstan, they're developing an infrastructure plan, which we expect to be finalized in the coming months, maybe third quarter, fourth quarter of this year. So it's going to be a 6-year plan. And of course, some projects from the plan will be financed with budget sources, but of course, some will be, I assume, will be open for PPPs. Mm-hmm.
As we start to, yes, go on, go. And then I've got a final kind of wrap-up question. Over here. No, front here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. 2 questions, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hello, Shule Kılıç, EBRD, Deputy Head of Turkey. Actually, we have a great experience with Terry and Katya in Turkey already on the PPPs. But maybe I'll a little bit challenged based on the experience we have in Turkey. The perception or the current experience we have is on the one side, we have very successful PPPs, but at the same time, especially on the authorities side, we are observing some perceptions that PPPs are not the right model. So it's like a fashion. Through a certain period of time, PPP becomes the most important and most successful model to implement the investments. But after a while, due to various experiences, observations, because this is such a long relationship and experience, we are also observing that inside authorities, there is also opposition towards PPPs. How can we deal with this, perception over the time? Because this is such a long-term relationship. Like, for example, in the hospital PPPs, we are talking 28 years of relationship. And people are changing, teams are changing, and new people are coming, and with certain perceptions in mind, which is causing problem in the relationship. How can we deal with this?
What would your advice be, Terry, on that changing that mindset?
Quick answer is I've been doing it for 30 years. That never changes. So you just have to live with it. And you have to live with the waves. But, it comes from a simple reason. A lot of government agencies are used to deliver these services themselves. And as a famous prime minister in Australia used to say, you can't ask Turkey to lobby for early Thanksgiving. So they usually oppose because they feel you're taking their jobs. So then it's about repurposing them as owners or final beneficiary versus the doers. That it takes time in terms of reforms and policies within government. So that's what government should focus about, so this wave doesn't keep coming. But it's everywhere. But I've never seen it stop.
You were talking to me about this earlier, Odelbek, as well, the challenge of this. What would be your best bit of advice?
Well, like Thierry said, it's a marriage, right? In marriage, I don't know. It's not always smooth, right? So you need to compromise, and as such, like the example that we were discussing earlier, the schools project, 13 schools project. That's the longest ever project that Uzbekistan has been developing, and it's because number one issue was we needed land, which is compatible, right? So land is, especially in Tashkent or larger cities, is a big issue. Second, when the price was sort of not announced, but they calculated it, the financial advisor, it was twice as much as government-funded schools, like per pupil or per student. Again, this was very hard to explain the value to money, value for money assessment and long-term benefits of that. So that took a bit of time. And third is, like Thierry said, all of a sudden, some of those service provision, again, not perhaps in the school project, but in the dialysis project, we've seen is that the Ministry of Health and the regional branches were providing these services, the dialysis services. Now, all of a sudden, some people, foreign people, coming and doing it, like way better than them. I mean, people are benefiting. People are actually very happy, but they're not happy. So the refocusing their mindset is a bit of a challenge. It will take time, and I think like a debt transaction, like if you're signing 10-year debt or 20-year debt, you need to comply with the covenants. You need to comply with the terms and conditions, pay the coupon or pay the interest rates, etc., etc. So this is kind of the relationship it should be, like a contractual relationship where everything is written on paper and everything should, both parties should respect the letter and spirit of what's written in the contract. There is no easy way, but I guess that's the only way.
Astrid, can I give you the final word, actually? We've got sort of about a minute left. What would be your best bit of advice? And I've got a question here on Slido. How do people actually get in touch? How does it work?
All right, okay.
It's a very specific question.
No, I mean, I think PPPs includes the word partnerships, right? And ultimately, that's really what we need to solidify and continue to building out. So continuing to advise governments in the long-term viability and monitoring of these projects is very important, but also then bringing in more private investors who understand the benefits. And ultimately, it's all about providing affordable and reliable infrastructure services to the population. Those are the end beneficiaries we all work for. And MDBs like EBRD have an important role in the process to ensure that that will actually be the case. So how to get in touch? I think it's www.
It's as simple as that. Go online.
globalinfrafacility.com, which is the first point of contact. But otherwise, also, we work with and through our trusted technical partners. So EBRD is a first port of call as well. And we're very happy to continue, of course, supporting scaling up public-private partnerships in the region.
And you'll be here after the panel?
Absolutely.
Someone wants to come to you directly. Thank you so much for a fantastic and enlightening panel. It was really interesting. I hope you'll enjoyed it. Thank you for your attendance and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Lucy, that was fantastic.